Deliver Us the Moon is one of those games I feel I've played 5 times already. You are a lone spaceman trying to uncover and fix a problem that no one knows anything about because it's in space. As a concept, this has a lot of potential, of course, depending on what type of space construct we actually find ourselves in. Just a small space station, a rogue AI could be the issue, maybe the crew went mad. A big space station could be aliens, a rogue AI maybe the crew went mad too. A far-fetched outpost on an alien world might be aliens, or a rogue AI, or the crew went mad. Deliver Us the Moon doesn't surprise in this regard, at least. The game has a pretty strong start, honestly, needing to manually launch the rocket to get you up to the moon in the first place, thereby also familiarizing yourself with the mechanics and the movement. The movement is atrocious, but combined with a variety of walking, floating and driving, and no part of the game actually requiring pinpoint accuracy, it's just more of an annoyance rather than an actual game-breaking mechanic. Launching the rocket with a dust storm on its way, giving you time to explore around and soak up some world building, but also pressing you for time near the end of this section is pretty cool.
You have to launch now, before the dust storm destroys the rocket and everything we've worked for.
The world building is serviceable, though a lot gets repeated. I'm pretty sure your main objective gets mentioned at least 4 times before you're even on the moon itself.
Deliver us the moon.
Make your way to the launch platform and prime the rocket for liftoff. There you can prime the rocket for launch. Get the rocket ready to launch as fast as possible. You'll need to find the MPT transmitter at the Pearson space station. Deliver us the moon. Try to find out what's wrong with the MPT connection so you can bring it back online.
The opening cinematic, while establishing the world and the stakes of the mission as a whole, is unnecessary because of this, since every key plot point gets mentioned by the girl screaming in your ear or by the environment itself, which you are of course encouraged to explore because of the type of game this is. As we are on our way to the moon to deliver it to them, let me use this as an opportunity to say that I was impressed by the wide variety of different gameplay modes and mini-games which are present here. There's walking around solving puzzles, floating around in 0G solving puzzles that are instanced, like the launch sequence or subsequent docking procedure, and the list goes on. This is quite impressive and definitely helps to alleviate some of the inherent boredom that comes with games like this, and this is also likely the reason that walking around feels so atrocious. Walking around on your own 2 feet feels like you're riding on a Segway, it takes a while to start moving, and turning corners feels like you're actually drifting. I haven't walked around on the moon myself though, so this could very well be an accurate representation of what moving around on the moon would actually feel like, but that still doesn't make the movement feel any better in-game. But seeing as a relatively large part of the game is you either floating around in 0G or driving a lunar rover around, it is forgivable a little bit. What's less forgivable is the constant crashing. I've had about 6 or 8 crashes in total, which averages about 1 an hour, always in visually impressive moments like cutscenes. So whether it's the Unreal Engine shitting the bed, as it often does, or bad optimization by the developers, I can't really tell. The game has had a re-release because the devs weren't happy with the state of the game originally, so this could be left over from that. But this, combined with an inspectable object still having remove tags on them, I doubt they finished it up as succinctly as they might have wanted to. The entire development of the game was a bit of a mess, it seems. Originally kickstarted and Steam greenlit, it was intended as an episodic release starting in 2016 and ending in 2017, but the game was released fully in 2018 and was then taken down and re-released in 2019, with the actual ending added on as well, which was absent in the original release, promised to be added later as a free DLC. With this game being a puzzle adventure game, or referred to less favorably so as a walking simulator with puzzles, it's very hard to actually talk about and show without spoiling parts of the narrative and gameplay, which are of course the main points of playing the game yourself. As such, I'll be spoiling basically everything from now on, so if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, play the game for yourself first. I would get it on sale though if I were you. In general, the game is serviceable, that is to say it was interesting enough for me to finish, despite some instability problems. Let's actually start by painting the picture of the setting itself real quick. The game takes place in 2059, but the majority of the story happened in 2054. There was a giant energy crisis in 2030. The world banded together to form a global space agency, which subsequently colonized the moon, started harvesting and refining helium-3 to use in nuclear fusion to produce energy, then send this energy to the Earth using a microwave power transmitter, or MPT for short. If you're a science fiction fan, this might sound familiar, as in it's essentially the exact plot of NO 2205 and a big part of the plot in the movie Moon. So for about 20 years, all was well. Energy was around freely thanks to this MPT until shit went down and no energy was provided anymore from 2054 onwards. Shit went south pretty quick on Earth, no more global unity or whatever, and 5 years after the blackout, you are sent to the moon by some rogue scientists to try and fix whatever problem may have occurred and try to find out what happened to everyone stationed on the lunar colony, because they're all still missing. You might think I skimmed over what happened on Earth itself during this time, but the truth is the game itself skips over it as well. There's next to no information whatsoever about the state of Earth and its people during or after this MPT golden age, and this is one of the biggest sore spots in the entire story, but we'll get to this later. So that's your mission: go to the moon, find out what happened, try to fix it and save the world. The main drive of the game itself is of course the mystery behind what actually happened to the colonists. Did something go wrong? Did they all die? Were they kidnapped by sexy moon creatures? Did an AI go rogue and turn on humanity? Let's find out. Arriving on Pearson station, the one on top of the lunar space elevator, shit's fucked. The life support system is offline and there's no one here. So you repower the life support system by using some leftover batteries and then start searching for the MPT control center in one of the wings of the station. There, it turns out you need to power up the rotation engine, so the rotation of the space station itself can generate more power. That does sound a bit counterintuitive, but I still think it's okay. So you power the rotation engine by pulling out batteries from the big life support system. Why did we need to put in those batteries to get it back online at the start? Who knows. Anyways, we do this, die a few times to the electricity or whatever, finally power up the engine, and it rips the station to absolute shreds. What the fuck is going on? Oh my god, we need to hold on to something. Oh my god, is this a quick time event? Okay, it's fine, I guess. Oh my god, I missed a quick time event. What are we going to do? Oh, the game crashed. Not a big deal. Restart the game. Okay, back in action. Oh my god, we're flying through space. We need something to hold on to. Help, I'm fucking dying. What the fuck is going on? Nice, we did it, bros. Let's go. Honestly, the scene is very good. The visuals are impressive, with thousands of fragments scattering around, and even the music is very subdued and paints this more as an emergency situation rather than a space opera epic cool moment that needs a standing ovation in the movie theater. They need to get back to the station ASAP, having to pick up oxygen canisters along the way, some even bamboozling you and flying away. All of it feels very real. There are some similar set piece moments like this later on as well, and they all do their job very well. Finally, we reach the station again, quickly get on the elevator to evacuate the shattered space station and get down to business. On the surface of the moon itself, our goal never wavers. There's still something wrong with the MPT. This time, we need to realign some smaller MPT towers to power up the Moonhub itself. We get there by first powering up the vehicle bay, of course. In the process, we acquire an ASE, which is this little drone thing hovering and following you around, which adds another layer to puzzles by requiring you to take control of this drone to fit in small spaces from time to time. You actually reassemble the one you find broken down in a pretty cool section all by yourself. The ASE also allows for holograms to be viewed, which are essentially small optional cutscenes that flesh out the story more and fills in some gaps as to what actually transpired here around the time of the blackout. These holograms, combined with the audio logs and scannable objects, are the only real storytellers here, aside from the environment itself, of course. This is all done fairly well, and it's also fairly obvious rather quickly what actually happened during and before the blackout. After getting our ASE in order and powering up the vehicle bay, we drive the rover around on the lunar surface. Disappointingly, there's no real exploring to be done here, at least as far as I could tell. Anytime I thought I saw some interesting building far away, it was out of bounds. And with the game crashing a few times during this section as well, I kept to the beaten path as much as possible. After realigning the two towers and nearly burning to death in the process, we can finally catch a train to the real power station.
This is Sarah Baker, lead engineer at Pearson Space Station.
That's right, we needed to power up life support so we could power up the rotation engine by powering down life support to give more power to the station so we could get on the elevator to power up the vehicle bay on the moon itself so we can go outside to realign MPT towers to power up the monorail at the Moonhub so we can go to another station to power up the actual reactor. But it gets even better because along the way we stop before arriving at the reactor to realign more MPT towers so we can power up the monorail again, almost die in the process. Also, we can go back on the monorail to get to the actual reactor to power that one up finally. These are, of course, what we call obstacles or plot points. Small goals the protagonist has to achieve as a stepping stone to achieve their ultimate goal. Every game does this, and essentially every story as well. I'm not gonna go into the mechanics of storytelling here or whatever, but if it starts to look silly or feel grating, as it does here, maybe diversifying or lessening those plot points might be a good idea. Also, yeah, that was basically the rest of the game. The monorail stopping part was decent, with another cool set piece at the end, very similar to the other one, some new puzzles here and there, some crashes here and there, deathly falling damage on the moon for some reason, and a cool lore reveal at the end of it as well. Throughout the entire game, you're essentially following in the footsteps of a certain Sarah, who, together with Rolf, were two engineers that came down from Pearson Station to assess the situation after the blackout. Due to various circumstances, they only had 40 minutes to fix up the MPT or go home. Sarah got trapped. Rolf tried to help but was evacuated, leaving Sarah stranded on her own. She tried to fix everything herself, and most audio logs you find are related to her. At the end of the Reinhold crater part, a hologram cutscene plays, which is obviously better animated than the optional ones, because this one isn't optional, showing Sarah being frustrated at the revelations of what happened to all of the crew that was stationed on the moon. They all just up and left. As it turns out, some charismatic leader guy whipped them all up in a bit of a frenzy, sprouting the belief that Earth, as it is now, as it has been, and as it will be, is essentially doomed and simply not worth bothering to save. This group, calling themselves Outward, siphoned away supplies meant to finish up a wing of the space station to build arcs. The arcs were built, the MPT was sabotaged, those who did not believe in the cause were rounded up against their will, with Outward using the blackout as an excuse to evacuate everyone, and they all left in search of presumably new worlds.
Yes, I know they evacuated! I know! I know I'm alone.
This is what frustrates Sarah in this cutscene here, and this part of the story is essentially open and shut by this point. The twist here, which kind of was alluded to throughout some small parts of gameplay if you're paying attention, is that you play as Rolf.
I'm on my way, Sarah. I'll find you.
Sarah's friend and colleague who inadvertently left her alone on the moon. It's a bit of a quick change, the way he leaps after Sarah's hologram during this cutscene here, especially seeing him stand idly by during all of the optional ones, including the one where Sarah gets stabbed, but this is a decent twist. This also explains how easy it is for you to log into parts of the computer systems of the space station, and how it is you know how to handle certain things that would seem out of place for someone who would be a first timer on the lunar colony. This cutscene was also the temporary ending of the game, until the final part was added later and left day one players quite blue-balled, as you can imagine. The final gameplay area here shows a lot of change, and it's very obvious that this is an area made separately from the rest of the game. A lot of new stuff is seen here. Jumping sections are suddenly very prominent, making holes through walls in an enemy patrol section also stand out here. Even hard crashes disappear completely, though there were other bugs, with you transforming into the reincarnation of a curling iron, as well as the enemies in the stealth section still being hostile and firing at me even after I died and respawned. The setting itself feels a bit off in general, and on the socio-economic front especially. The last-ditch effort to save humanity from an apocalyptic energy crisis somehow doesn't have a contingency plan. There was no security around, unless they were all swayed by the charismatic leader guy, which definitely would be a possibility, so I'll give the game that. The MPT was active for about 20 years, which is more than enough time to start any other energy project, like say a Dyson sphere or a Dyson swarm, which isn't as hard to start with as you might think, not if you have fusion energy like in this case. Just watch the Kurzgesagt video. You need energy to make energy, and if you have energy, you should use it. There's also a literal space elevator on the moon, yet this seems to be the only real advanced infrastructure anywhere. It just feels like humanity's presence on the moon in a situation like this in real life would be far greater than what is shown here. From snippets you find, it also seems like the entire planet relied solely on the MPT for its entire energy demand, instead of being aware of the fragile and limited nature of relying on a single microwave beam to provide an entire planet with energy, and being active in searching for even better alternatives. Outward seemingly being the first and only group bothering to look beyond the Earth and Moon system seems like a stretch too, especially given, again, the generous time frame humanity has had with the MPT already. And while the Earth side is kept very vague throughout the entire game, the MPT supposedly functions as a, for all intents and purposes, infinite energy source. So why planetary colonization is not on the table yet is a big mystery. The Tombaugh fusion reactor seemingly being dangerous and going out of control in the audio logs of Isaac and Sarah also don't make a lot of sense to me. This reactor is supposed to be a nuclear fusion reactor, a helium-3 one to be exact, which is the entire reason this is on the moon in the first place, of course. Nuclear fusion is not at all like nuclear fission, which we use today in our own nuclear power plants. With fusion, there is no risk of a meltdown whatsoever. Even radiation would essentially be non-existent depending on what particles get released during the fusion process. These are protons in the case of helium-3 fusion with deuterium, while most dangerous forms of radiation consist of neutrons. I'm no nuclear physicist, of course. I wouldn't be making retard YouTube videos if that were the case, but I do know at least a little bit about the workings of potential fusion reactors, and the fusion reactor itself isn't as dangerous as one might think, at least not in the way it's seemingly portrayed here. This doesn't mean there can go nothing wrong, of course, but the challenge of a fusion reactor isn't containing the reaction, like in a nuclear fission reactor, but rather sustaining the reaction. This little physics lesson aside, the focus here is of course the human part of the issue and the conflict, not the logistical or scientific part. This human part has a very fitting and nicely executed ending. You, as Rolf, fix the MPT in the end and also find out what happened to Sarah. She got stabbed, as I mentioned, by someone who was just trying to protect his daughter by betraying humanity and whatnot. But the guy had remorse and interred Sarah in a cryosleep casket, which you find stumbling, being mortally wounded during the reactor fix-up. Having completed both of his objectives at this point, Rolf sinks down content and dies. A powerful ending to be sure, even with a post-credit scene with the girl that was screaming in your ear the entire time showing up and finding you a while later, thereby also confirming humanity is back on its feet again. I think the ending sequence could have been a lot better if Rolf actually took off his helmet here before sinking down. It could be the studio doesn't know how to do good facial animations, since all of the cutscenes with other characters have this Tacoma vibe to them, where they're just low poly holograms zipping around, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. It adds to the mystery and the setting and such, but the ending, while effective, could punch even harder, I feel. The ending was added on later though, as a free DLC add-on and just included in the game after the re-release, so now the game feels like it has an actual ending at least. While the game certainly has its issues, both in and out of gameplay itself, I do feel Deliver Us the Moon provides an interesting enough experience to play for yourself, if you get it cheap. I got it for 15 euros on sale, which was still a bit steep in my mind. But for a first time project for a small studio, it definitely gets the job done, even with all its flaws and annoyances. Thanks for watching, have a good one, and I'll see you soon.